Welcome, this is Dr Woodhead with Schofield Biblical Institute and Theological Seminary, and I want to present over the next two messages the changing geography of the land of Israel. Now, God gave title to this geography, the land of Israel, to the nation Israel, and He told them that the land belonged to Him forever. And He was giving it to them as we would call in normal modern terms a leasehold agreement, in that they had the property and they would be able to stay on the property. They would own the property even though He was the sovereign owner, and they may not always have occupancy. Now, even though it was deeded to them, they've never had all of the property that was deeded to them. The boundary lines have changed significantly over the last 4,500 years. And so the fact that the boundary lines change does not impact what God has given to them, because they are going to realize the entire scope of all of the property that was given to them. Now, today, what I would like to do is go over a series of Bible verses in the Old Testament, principally in 3 books in the Torah, that affirm the authority of God and Him giving this property to the nation Israel. And then we're going to go over a series of maps in our next 2 sessions, or this session and the next session, that is, depicting what the size of this property is and what the outcome will be when the millennial kingdom is finally instituted upon this earth. So let's look at some Bible verses and then move on from there. The first Bible verse I want to read is going to be Exodus chapter 6, verses 7 to 8. And there the Lord is saying, "And I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God. And ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will bring you into the land concerning the which I did swear to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you for an heritage. I am the Lord." And then it refers back to Genesis 15, verses 18 to 21, which is the first appearance of the Abrahamic covenant. "In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." Now, Leviticus 25:23 says, "The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me." Leviticus 25:23. Now, Numbers 34, verses 1 to 3, start defining the property. "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall unto you for an inheritance, even the land of Canaan with the coast thereof. Then your south quarter shall be from the wilderness of Zin, along by the coast of Edom, and your south border shall be the utmost coast of the salt sea eastward." Moving on to verse 4 through 6. "And your border shall turn from the south to the ascent of Akrabim, and pass on to Zin, and the going forth thereof shall be from the south to Kadesh Barnea, and shall go on to Hazadarah, and pass on to Azman. And the border shall fetch a compass from Azman unto the river of Egypt, and the goings out of it shall be at the sea. And as for the western border, ye shall even have the great sea for a border. This shall be your west border. Now, verses 7 to 9 say, and this shall be your north border. From the great sea ye shall point out for you Mount Hor. From Mount Hor ye shall point out your border unto the entrance of Hamath, and the goings forth of the border shall be to Zildad. And the border shall go on to Ziphron, and the goings out of it shall be at the Hazarinan, and this shall be your north border. Verses 10 to 12. And ye shall point out your east border from Hazaranan to Shepham, and the coast shall go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border shall descend and shall reach unto the side of the sea of Chinnereth eastward. And the border shall go down to Jordan, and the goings out of it shall be at the salt sea. This shall be your land with the coast round about. Now, this is a map of the property that God gave to the Hebrews, the nation Israel. And looking at this, you can see a lot of Bible verses that support these things, not just what I read to you, but a lot of other Bible verses that I'm not going to go over here, but you can see these verses and you can see how they're tied to the different areas here. The dark line outline is the property that the Jews have been given, and first it was given to Abraham. So Abraham got the property. The property has been defined to Moses in the Mosaic Law, and this is the property that they will have someday. They don't have it now. They don't have it now. They have a different size property today, mostly what's in the gray area, the light gray and the dark gray area here. But what we're going to be doing is looking at the various sizes of the property that they have had. Now, if you look at this map here, you can see that the nation Israel is this little teeny red sliver on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea, and everything that's in green is what the Islamists have. That's Muslim territory. And it becomes really apparent once we look at this that it's a bit of idiocracy here, that the Muslims claim they don't have enough land and they belong in this land here where the Jews are. If we take a comparison of the landmass of the United States with Israel, we can see that little Israel, in yellow there, is very, very small compared to the nation, the United States of America. Matter of fact, it's not even as big as New Jersey. This map shows the land that the Jews and others were occupying after the ark landed on Ararat. Now, Ararat is just south of the Black Sea there, and the land in red is where the sons of Japheth went. Remember, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The sons of Ham went to the yellow areas, which would be basically in the southwest area, and that today is primarily Africa. And you can see the blue area is where Shem went, and that is primarily Arabia and Israel. So this is the property that was given to Moses at the time that people left the ark now. Now, this map here shows what the property is at the time that the property was divided up under General Joshua when he went into the property after they had sojourned in Kadesh Barnea. And Kadesh Barnea is on the southeast side of their property. And as we know, They wandered for 40 years coming out of Egypt because they did not want to obey God, so he kept them out. And finally, when the new generation had appeared, the old generation died out except for two people, and that was Joshua and Caleb. They went in and claimed the property, and this is how it got divided up amongst the 12 sons of Jacob. And this is just another map depicting the same property and how it got divided up. It's an older map. The actual dimensions are a little bit flexible because we don't know exactly where some of these ancient towns were because the properties change, names and so on, and that's what's happened here. But this is close to the other map, and if you look at these maps, and there are several like this, you can see that the property, the lines are a little bit flexible. They're in roughly the same spot for each division, but they're just a little bit flexible. Now, at the time of the Lord Jesus, this is the property that the Jews had. They had this amount of property in green, and you'll notice that it's being called Palestine here. The name Palestine is not a proper name. It's a slam, if you will. And about 132 A.D., there was a false prophet that had risen up, false Messiah. His name was Simon Bar Kokhba. Well, he did not organize an insurrection against the Roman occupation, but his followers did, and they fought the Romans for 3 years before the Romans finally prevailed. And the Emperor Hadrian, who had conducted this fight against the Jews, was so mad at them that he changed the name of the land to be their mortal enemy. That is the Jews' mortal enemy of all times, the Philistines. And he mispronounced it, and Palestine is what he called it. So that's the origin of that name, and it's not a real good name. It is not a good name at all. So it's not something that we like to use. Now, Roman armies entered Jerusalem in 63 BC when the Roman general Pompey conquered the region. You know, the city, Jerusalem, was going to remain in Roman hands in one form or another for about 600 years. Now, after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Byzantine emperors continued to rule the Holy Land until its eventual capture in 638 AD by the Muslim Caliph Umar. You know, despite Jerusalem being removed from Christian hands, the city remained open to all faiths until the conquest of the Fatimid Caliph Hakim came into power, and he began to persecute Jews and Christians and despoil the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, it's important to understand that not all of these Muslim caliphs were persecuting other people. A lot of them were just power hungry. But that's not the central tenet of Islam. Islam is to conquer, and for those that don't convert, then they need to be killed. Again, the first one, Umar, he was pretty even-handed, but Hakim, he was not. Now, he began to persecute the Christians and the Jews, and this persecution kind of abated after his death in 1021 AD, but the relations remained strained, and they became even more so 50 years later when Jerusalem passed from the comparatively tolerant Egyptians to the Seljuk Turk. Now, the Turks had controlled the Holy Land here for quite a while until Pope Urban II's call to arms to start the Crusades. And as the Byzantine Empire in the 11th century just struggled to hold back the Seljuk Turks, Emperor Alexius I appealed to the West for aid. The plea didn't fall on deaf ears, and in 1095 AD, Pope Urban II delivered his great speech at the Council of Clermont, in which he exhorted Christendom to go to war for the sepulchre, promising that the journey would count as full penance. Now, the battle cry of the Christians, he urged, would be Deus Vult, In other words, God wills it. And from the crosses that were distributed at this meeting, the Crusaders took their name. Now, this next map that I have up here shows the Ottoman rule on the eve of World War I. Since the destruction of the Second Jewish Commonwealth by the Romans, the land referred to as Palestine, again, has been ruled by a series of foreign occupiers. Each successive ruler subdivided his conquest as he saw fit. And though none since the Romans considered Palestine as having a separate administration or a geographic entity, the Ottoman Turks that ruled this area from roughly the year 1516 to 1917 regarded it as part of southern Syria. The land that was later referred to as Palestine was divided into 3 separate districts. The area was underpopulated and it just stayed kind of economically stagnant until the arrival of the first Zionist pioneers in the late 1800s. And they came to rebuild the Jewish land. The country had remained, quote, the Holy Land, unquote, in the religious and historic consciousnesses of mankind, which kept it associated with the Bible and the history of the Jewish people. The Jewish development of the country also attracted large numbers of other immigrants, both Jewish and Arab. Now, we know what the name Palestine is, and people had started calling it that again. But I want to give you a quote here from Mark Twain, who visited it during the late 1800s, and he said, among the many descriptions of Palestine's desolation is desolation prior to the Zionist immigration. It was a desolate country whose soil was rich enough, but it's given over wholly to weeds. A silent, mournful expanse is what he called it. A desolation is here that not even imagination can grace with the pomp of life and action. We never saw a human being in the whole route. There was hardly a tree or a shrub anywhere. Even the olives and the cactus, whose fast friends of a worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. Now, that was from his book, The Innocents Abroad, or the New Pilgrim's Progress. And you can get an idea how this was divided up at that time. And now our next slide is the map of the British Mandate. And that's what the League of Nations, after World War I at the Paris Peace Conference, ended up giving Great Britain. Now, this runs from a period in various forms that we'll look at from 1920 to 1946. But it was only after World War I at the Paris Peace Conference that this name Palestine started to really get clearly defined and applied to this piece of land on the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. And the area today, which basically comprises Israel and Jordan, was this British Mandate. It was agreed that, quote, Palestine was to become a League of Nations mandate, and they were going to entrust that to Great Britain. So, under the terms of the mandate, Britain's principal obligation was to facilitate the implementation of the Balfour Declaration, which was given by Lord Balfour in England on November the 2nd of 1917. And now he pledged the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. There weren't going to be any territorial restrictions whatsoever, neither east nor west of the Jordan River, that he had placed in this mandate on the Jewish national home. In fact, the mandate stipulated that Britain was to facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions and shall encourage close settlement by the Jews. Now, the Paris Peace Conference was held from January to June of 1919, and it ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June the 28th. It's interesting as to what happened here, but let's look at what Balfour said as a result of this. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Now, the next map that I want to put up here is what the British Administration Division was from 1922 to 1946. Nevertheless, in July of 1922, the British divided Palestine into 2 administrative districts. Now look at the black line here, right in the middle of the map. The Jews would only be permitted west of the black line and to the east. That was what would become Transjordan, as the British installed a Hashemite ruler named Abdullah, and he'd been expelled from the Arabian Peninsula before this. But making this division, the British reduced the area available to the Jewish national home to only 22% of the designated area of Palestine that had come out of the Paris Peace Conference. Now, it's interesting to look at this map, and then we'll see where this goes from here. Britain partitioned it again in 1946. In spite of this action, the Transjordan remained in every way part of the Palestine Mandate. The Mandate laws remained in effect in Transjordan, and the Palestine Mandate currency was the legal currency tender in both sides here. Jews in western Palestine, as well as the Arabs in the east and the west, carried Palestine Mandate passports. It was only 24 years later, 1946, that the Brits unilaterally granted Transjordan its independence. And then by granting Transjordan's independence, the British had partitioned Palestine and created an independent Palestine Arab state east of the Jordan River. We know that as Jordan today. Article 7 of the Mandate for Palestine stipulated the acquisition of Palestinian citizenship by Jews who take up their permanent residence in Palestine. It's interesting. The next map here that we have shows the UN Partition Plan of 1947. As a result of World War II, on November the 29th, 1947, the General Assembly of the United Nations voted with a 2/3 majority to partition Western Palestine into a Jewish and an Arab state. The Jews were to be granted what appears on the map in blue. So look at now, the Jews have gotten even less now than what they had in the first mandate. Nothing compared to what God gave Abraham. Over 75% of the land allocated to the Jews was desert. And they were, despite they were just so desperate to find a haven for the remnants of European Jewry after the Nazi Holocaust, the Jewish population accepted a plan which accorded them a diminished state. Now, the Arabs, intent on preventing any Jewish entity into Palestine, they rejected it. While the Jewish leadership and population accepted the partition, all of the Arab member states of the UN, it was Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Yemen, voted against it. And upon the resolution's adoption, the Arab delegates declared partition invalid. We see that from the New York Times in 1947 of November the 30th. But within 2 days, the Arab governments declared their opposition, and what they did was decided that they were going to go to war. Now, this is the map in greater detail here, a little clearer, that you can see exactly what the Jews had. They have the light tan area on the eve of their Declaration of Independence, which is May the 14th of 1948. This is what they had. Now, bear this in mind as we move forward with other maps. The Arab invasion of 1948 happened when the Arabs not only rejected the UN Partition Plan, but attacked Israel from all sides. And on that day, Israel declared its independence. The Arab League Secretary General Azam Pasha declared jihad, a holy war, he said. This is going to be a war of extermination and momentous massacre, which is going to be spoken of like the Mongolian massacres in the Crusades. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, declared, "I declare a holy war. My Muslim brothers, murder the Jews, murder them all." The armies of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq invaded the tiny new country with a declared intent of destroying it. They just wanted to destroy it. And they came at all of these positions. You can see how the Syrian army and the Lebanese army came from the north. The Iraq and Saudi army came from the east. The Jordanian army came from the east. And the Egyptian army came from the south. Well, the net result of this is what we see here, is eventually it was an Armistice Agreement. And during the war, though, for independence, many Jewish villages were destroyed, synagogues, seminaries desecrated, fields and the buildings were burned, the Jewish quarter of the old city Jerusalem was besieged and kept without food or water, and eventually the Jordanians expelled the Jews from the old city. The gray area here and the inset marks the old city. The Jordanians took the East Jerusalem on the east side of Jerusalem, which is a large portion of land on the west bank of the Jordan River, and that really narrowing Israel, seen here in the blue, to approximately 9 miles at its narrowest point. Egyptian troops overran the Gaza and the west as well as the southern outskirts of Jerusalem, and despite the tremendous losses, the new Jewish state survived. In 1949, the nation Israel signed armistice agreements with Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Transjordan. And in 1949 of April, they changed their name to Jordan. So no longer Transjordan, just plain Jordan. And one of the major consequences of this was that Jordan annexed Judea and Samaria, that they're calling the West Bank. The annexation was not recognized immediately by the international community, with the exception of Britain and Pakistan. This territory became a launching ground for constant terrorist attacks against Israel's civilian population. What's important for us to see here with this map that I will close with is the Jews fought back these nations with World War I weapons that were given to them from Czechoslovakia. Well, God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you in our next session.
We hope you have been blessed by this message today on a contemporarily relevant Bible topic. Dr. Woodhead has been teaching the Bible for 25 years. He is a pastor, an author, and conference speaker on various biblical subjects. Dr. Woodhead is the Dean of the Jewish Studies School at Schofield Seminary. His seminary teaching includes the Old Testament and Biblical Hebrew. He has attended Hebrew University in Jerusalem and Hebrew College in Massachusetts. If you would like a DVD of today's program, please write us at Post Office Box 48, Hart, Michigan, 49420. Again, that's Post Office Box 48, Hart, Michigan, 49420, or call us at 877-706-2479. That's 877-706-2479. Once again, 877-706-2479. The cost is $15. Let us know if you have any questions about today's broadcast. We look forward to providing you with continuing Bible messages each week on this station. God bless you.